Balmoral Castle had never felt this empty, not even in the days after Queen Elizabeth's passing. It was as if the walls themselves knew something darker was settling in. Camilla stood in the late Queen's private office, the air heavy with old perfume and older secrets. Her hand rested on the edge of an ancient oak cabinet, dust thick along the surface like time itself had sealed it shut. But something pulled her curiosity, or maybe ambition, toward a rusted keyhole. She twisted it open. Inside sat a small wooden box bound with a faded scarlet ribbon. She opened it. What she found weren't just letters. These were Queen Elizabeth's private thoughts, confessions inked in neat, sharp handwriting. And buried in those pages was a truth no one in the monarchy ever dared say out loud. Charles wasn't fit to rule, not emotionally, not mentally. Elizabeth wrote about therapy sessions, Charles's inability to give or receive love, and her regret for choosing the crown over her son. It wasn't just tragic, it was explosive. Camilla's eyes lit up. She had just discovered the ultimate weapon. In that moment, she stopped being queen consort. She became something far more dangerous, a queen with leverage. Later that evening, in the heart of Clarence house, Camilla sat across from Charles in the library. Firelight danced across her face, casting sharp shadows on her high cheekbones. She didn't scream. She didn't need to. Her words came calmly, each one a surgical incision. "She's everywhere now, Charles," Camilla said, her voice soft but cold. "Kate, just like Diana. Smiling for the press, holding babies, stealing headlines. The people have made her their queen in everything but name. And what are we? Afterthoughts." Charles sat silent, hollow-eyed. On the table between them lay the letters. She tapped a nail against the yellowed paper. One whisper from these, and it's over. The king who needed therapy. The monarch who never knew love. You'll be seen not as a leader, but a patient. Charles flinched. That hit deep, because he knew she was right. Her demand came next. It wasn't loud, but it was absolute. Pull Kate from the spring festival, no more speeches, no more headlines, dim her light before it overshadows us. Still, Charles said nothing. His silence wasn't agreement, but it wasn't resistance either. It was the silence of a man whose spirit had been slowly chipped away by a lifetime of duty, by his father's iron discipline, by his mother's emotional absence, and now by a wife who had learned to twist all those wounds like a knife. But what neither of them realized was that someone else had heard everything. William. He had been standing just outside the door. The second he heard the words Kate and control, the temperature inside him shifted. His jaw tightened, his heart thundered. He had known Camilla had ambition, but this was treachery. Not just against the crown, against his father, against his wife, against the future of the monarchy. He waited until she left the room. Then he walked in. Charles looked up slowly, a man already stripped of every defense. William saw it all. The defeat in his father's eyes, the exhaustion, the shame. "I heard it all," William said, stepping into the firelight. "She's blackmailing you with those letters. She wants to silence Kate. You can't let her." Charles's voice broke as he spoke. "They're true, Will. Every word. I was broken as a boy. I never learned how to love." But William didn't flinch. He didn't pity. He didn't retreat. He dropped to his knees, placed a hand on his father's shoulder, and said, "You're not alone. And you're not weak. She will not win. I won't let her." The next morning, the palace looked calm on the outside, but inside, a quiet war had begun. William sat at a long mahogany table in a private chamber of Kensington Palace, surrounded by 3 trusted aides who had once served under Queen Elizabeth herself. These weren't just advisors, they were survivors, veterans of scandals, family feuds, and constitutional chaos. Now they waited for their prince to speak. William didn't pace, he didn't flinch. He simply looked each of them in the eye and laid it out. Camilla doesn't need to be removed. That gives her too much power, too much sympathy. We're going to do something far worse. We're going to make her irrelevant. His voice was measured but resolute. There would be no outbursts, no leaks, no theatrics, just precise, calculated moves. First, they would investigate her connections, especially the PR firms and media consultants she'd been quietly funding. William knew that Camilla's sudden rise in favorable coverage hadn't come from charm alone. Somewhere money had moved. Somewhere someone had been paid to plant headlines that painted Kate as distant, aloof, even manipulative. Second, he wanted a quiet audit of every charitable fund under Camila's name. Anything suspicious, overpayments, shell invoices, personal expenses was to be documented and archived. Not exposed, not yet. Information, after all, was only as powerful as its timing. And then came the most critical step, a formal review with the Privy Council. Not to strip her of title. That would create headlines. No, William would ask for a reassignment of ceremonial roles. Camilla would keep her crown, her title, her jewelry, but she would no longer represent the monarchy at public events. No speeches, no official duties, no contact with media without explicit approval. A queen by title only, and to someone like her, that would be worse than exile. Meanwhile, inside Clarence's house, Camilla had no idea her days of silent dominance were numbered. She believed Charles would fold, as he always had. She believed William would stay in his lane. She believed she still held all the cards. But Charles was changing. He had spent the last few days alone in his private study, a room lined with portraits of ancestors who had ruled empires and survived wars, but who had never known what it was like to be imprisoned by their own family. He stared at Queen Elizabeth's letters every night, rereading the lines about Gordonston, about her regrets, about the emotional void that had shaped him. One evening, while the rain tapped softly against the stained glass windows, Charles received an envelope from William. It was old, yellowed at the edges, sealed with the Queen's personal crest. William had found it among Elizabeth's archived belongings, an unopened letter addressed to Charles, clearly meant to be read only after her passing. Inside, the handwriting was unmistakably hers, but the tone was different. "I'm sorry," she wrote, "not as a queen, as your mother. I failed you when you needed me most. I thought making you strong meant making you hard. I forgot that kings are men before they wear the crown." The letter cracked something open in Charles, not a breakdown, but a release. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to cry, not out of weakness, but out of mourning for the boy he never got to be. And in that moment, he knew he didn't have to keep surrendering to Camilla. He didn't have to be silent anymore. He didn't have to be alone. Clarence's house stood cloaked in darkness, but the library glowed with firelight, casting long shadows across the paneled walls. Camilla entered with her usual grace, black silk flowing, lips painted in crimson confidence. Her heels struck the wooden floor like a war drum. She expected submission, the usual silence, maybe another feeble plea from Charles. But this time, something felt off. Charles was already seated by the fireplace, his posture straight, his eyes calm. He wasn't alone. William stood at his side, arms folded, a quiet storm of presence. There was no panic, no tension, just certainty. Camilla's smile faltered. On the table in front of her lay a thick dossier, neatly stacked. No theatrics, no warning. William didn't wait for her to speak. He gestured to the file with a nod. "These are your emails, bank transfers, meetings with press firms, every move you made to smear Cade's name, fund false narratives, and manipulate public sentiment." Camilla scoffed. "What do you want, William? A confession?" He didn't blink. "You're going to step down from all royal duties permanently," she laughed, sharp and brittle. "You can't strip me of my crown?" "No," Charles said quietly, his voice steady, "but I can make it meaningless." Camilla turned to him, expecting the old version, the man who avoided conflict, who bent under pressure, but what she saw now was unfamiliar. There was no fear in Charles's eyes, no hesitation, just clarity. "You used my pain against me," he said. "You took the worst parts of my life and tried to turn them into leverage. I allowed it because I thought I was too broken to fight back, but I was wrong." Her mask cracked for a moment. "I did everything for us." "You did everything for yourself," William said, "and now you'll watch it all slip away." She opened the dossier, flipping through the pages. Each line, each figure, each damning sentence etched in cold truth. Her breath caught. This wasn't just a threat. It was airtight. Months of careful maneuvering laid bare. She closed the file slowly, her fingers trembling. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. "You remain queen consort in title," William said, "but nothing more. No events, no interviews, no decisions, no press. You'll fade quietly into the background, exactly where you feared you'd end up. Camila didn't respond. She simply turned and walked out, her heels echoing against the marble floor. With every step, the weight of power drained from her body, leaving only the shell of what once was. Weeks passed, her face vanished from the public eye. No appearances, no statements. The palace released no comment, and the press, once subtly guided by her team, found nothing to chase. At Windsor, a different kind of royal moment was unfolding. Charles, seated in a modest studio, stared into the lens of a camera. No throne, no grand room, just him, in a simple suit, hands clasped, voice clear. I believed for most of my life that a king must never show weakness. I was taught to bury emotion, to hide pain, to become stone. But that made me less of a man, less of a father, less of a human being. He paused, eyes glistening. I was broken once, but I'm learning to heal, and I owe that to my son. Across Britain, people watched in stunned silence. This wasn't just a king, this was a man reclaiming himself. Back at Kensington Palace, Kate stood beside William on a sunlit balcony, waving to a roaring crowd. Her smile was soft, genuine. Not just a princess, a symbol of what the monarchy could become, transparent, strong, and built on truth. And Camilla, alone at Highgrove, stared out at her empty garden. She wore the crown, but it no longer meant anything. The monarchy had moved on without her.